Hello and welcome to this psychology video where we'll look at how to answer question 8 in the second set of A-level sample assessment material papers for AQA. So here's question 8 and it reads, a woman is being questioned by a police officer about a heated argument she witnessed on an evening out with friends. The argument took place in a bar and ended up with a violent assault. A knife was discovered later by police in a car park of the bar. Did you see the knife the attacker was holding? Asked the police officer. I'm not sure there was a knife. Yes, there probably was, replied the woman. I was so scared at the time that this is hard to remember, and my friends and I have talked about what happened so many times that I've almost forgotten or almost not sure of what I did and didn't see. The question then reads, discuss research into two or more factors that affect the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Refer to the information above in your answer. Okay. Now for this question I'd use the following structure, and before we begin it's useful to remind ourselves that this is clearly an application based essay, and therefore we've got to demonstrate AO1 knowledge, AO3 evaluation and AO2 application. Okay. And I've said them in that order deliberately because I would use the following structure. So I would start by outlining my first piece of research because the question says discuss research, and while that can be studies or theories, I'm going to go down the studies route for this question. So I'm going to start by outlining Loftus and Palmer. Then I'm going to draw on some methodological evaluation, and then at that point I would apply my knowledge to the STEM. So if we're talking about Loftus and Palmer and the concepts of misleading questions, this clearly applies to the STEM because the police officer said, did you see the knife, which is evidently a misleading question. I would then repeat this structure by outlining my second piece of research by Johnson and Scott, who looked at the effect of anxiety on the effect of misleading, on the effect of eyewitness testimony. However, this time for my evaluation, I would consider the use of other research. I might bring in a case study here by Yule and Cutshall that contradicts the findings of Johnson and Scott. And again, I would apply my knowledge to the STEM with reference to the part where she said I was so scared, which is indicating that she's likely to be in a state of anxiety. Now, the beauty with the structure that's on screen now is that if you don't have time to actually finish your essay, you've already demonstrated all of the assessment objectives within the first half of the essay, and therefore this is a much better position to be in rather than just demonstrating all of your knowledge with no evaluation and no application. So I strongly recommend this style of structure for this type of discuss-based essay. So let's take a look at that first half and see what that looks like if we was to put that to paper. So if we're starting by outlining our research, I might start with a tiny intro that says there's two key factors that affect the reliability of eyewitness testimony, and these are leading questions as well as anxiety. Notice now how I've summarised Loftus and Palmer. The trick is here, there is so much you could say, and you will know the study very well, that you want to write a summary in about sort of 50 to 75 words, and that's the real challenge with this particular essay. So take a look at how concise the summary is on screen. I've said Loftus and Palmer examined three groups of students who watched a 1-minute video of a car accident. One group was asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, while the other group was asked the same question but with a verb hit. So I've gone for Loftus and Palmer's second study, you will have noticed. 1 week later they were asked, did you see any broken glass? Despite the fact there was none. 32% of participants in the smash condition said yes, compared to 14% for hit and 12% in the control group, suggesting that misleading questions can significantly affect the reliability of eyewitness testimony and make people report seeing things they didn't see. And notice how I've linked that to the key wording of the question, the reliability of eyewitness testimony. So there's our knowledge. I'm then going to bring in some evaluation, and I'm going to do a very simple methodological valuation point here. So I might say that a limitation of their research is that it lacks population validity. Their experiments consisted of 150 American students, and it's reasonable to argue that the students are therefore less experienced drivers and maybe therefore less accurate at estimating speeds. And why this matters is because we can't generalise the results to other populations. For example, older or more experienced drivers who may be able to accurately judge speeds and may not be susceptible to misleading questions in exactly the same way. So there we've done our AO1, we've now done our AO3 evaluation, and finally I'm now going to apply that to the extract, and I'm just going to say, just like in Loftus and Palmer's experiment, the woman questioned in the extract was asked a leading question, did you see the knife? And the use of the word use of the word the is leading the woman to think there was a knife, even though she wasn't originally sure, and that's really evident because actually she gives a rather confused reply where she says there probably was a knife. That entire first half is about 250 words, which is about right for sort of, if we're aiming for 450 to 500 words, we're on track really now to be able to repeat this structure again for our second half and our second factor, okay? Now, you might look at that structure and think that's an awful lot of information to digest. So I just want to present the same structure on screen now, but in a slightly different format that's a little bit easier on the eye, okay? So again, you start with your knowledge, and that's exactly the same paragraph I started with. The middle part, that methodological criticism, is really just a burger paragraph with the point, brought in our evidence, and our bottom bun linking that evidence back to the question. And then we have a separate small section for our AO2. So if you think that first sort of page was a bit confusing with the amount of information, don't be afraid to just break the essay up into sort of more manageable chunks so that it's slightly easier to digest. Okay. Now let's take a look at the second part of the essay with the second factor, where we're going to look at anxiety, bring in the researcher Johnson and Scott, look at a second study by Yule and Cutshall, and again apply it to the extract. Okay. So here's our knowledge, and again notice how I've concisely summarised this in about 75 words. So here I've said Johnson and Scott investigated the effect of anxiety on the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Participants were invited to a laboratory where they were exposed to one of two conditions, in which the person left the laboratory either holding a pen or a bloodied knife. The participants were then shown 50 photographs and asked to identify the person. Those in the pen condition identified the target 49% of the time, compared to 33% in the knife condition, and Loftus claimed that the participants who were exposed to the knife had higher levels of anxiety and were more likely to focus their attention on the weapon, which is why it's called the weapon focus effect, which suggests that the anxiety affected the reliability of their eyewitness testimony. So that's Loftus's assumption based on what's called the weapon focus effect, building on the research of Johnson and Scott. However, what I'm going to do for my evaluation here is, rather than this time use a methodological criticism, I'm going to draw on other research by Yule and Cutshall who actually contradict Loftus and Johnson and Scott, because Yule and Cutshall investigated the effects of anxiety in a real-life shooting, and what they found was that the 13 witnesses who took part in the follow-up interview were accurate in their eyewitness account up to 5 months later, and little was found in their testimonies overall. All of the major details remain the same, and what their findings suggest is that actually, despite the anxiety the people experienced at the time of the accident, it had little to no effect on their subsequent memory of the event. The beauty is, by drawing on this sort of additional research, is that actually it makes our application a lot more fluid here. Because what we can say is that the woman outlined in the extract was clearly anxious. She said, "I was so scared." And this could have affected the reliability. However, because the extract says that she was uncertain whether she saw a knife, the weapon focus effect in Johnson and Scott's research wouldn't really apply here. And actually the results of Yule and Cutshall, which are based on real-world crimes, suggest that actually the anxiety would have little to no effect on the reliability of her memory for the event, which should remain accurate even up to 5 months later. And we can draw all that out in our application, okay? What you've got now on screen is the entire essay, which is about 550 words long, so it's a little on the lengthy side for this one. But what you can clearly see colour-coded is that the black text is our knowledge part, the blue text is our evaluation or the discussion, and the green text is our application. So it's very obvious from the structure on screen that we've got all three of those different elements there, okay? Hope you found this video useful, and again, for more support, take a look at the different options that are on screen now. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.